As a change agent in economic and social justice for over 45 years, I knew stories of resilience, well-being, and prosperity were taking root on reservations and in cities all across this land.
It was always about the greater good. It was always about what's best for the whole nation, what's best for the earth, and not what's best for the individual.
Our focus is around our unhoused relatives. So when I talk about unhoused relatives, I talk about unhoused people, not just people of color, all people. Our unhoused relatives don't need more policing, right? We don't need for the city and for the police to criminalize poverty. We need connection. We need relationality. We need those relationships. We need to be a community and take care of each other.
The foundation of our school is Wotakuye. That's our kinship system. And all of our kids here, we refer to each other by relative terms. That means that we're good to each other, we look out for each other, and we take care of each other. And every day that we remind them that, but that isn't just us, it's everything. We take care of the earth, we take care of the plants, the animals, and our things that we have because they come from the earth.
Our relationship is with the land and with plants and animal relatives, knowing that we aren't, above them. We are kind of on the same level as them, that we're all sharing this one earth. And so we're all connected in that way, whether, it's a stranger on the street or, an ant crawling on the ground, we're all connected.
When we emerged, through a series of events, some of us became human and some of us became buffalo. And so when we talk about buffalo, when we talk about Khatkanka, we're really talking about our relatives, our other selves, because we come from the same root. We come from the same ancestor. And so there really is no difference between Lakota people and buffalo people.
White nationalist mentality about power and what that perception of power is. And it is under those auspices of power, perceived power, whether it was from the Catholic Church or from the United States government, that our communities, that our peoples were nearly annihilated or exterminated by the colonizer.
One of the most pivotal movements that pushed us to where we're at was the implementation around early 1900, 1910, 1915, was the federal government, along with the help with different churches, different denominations, came to our reservation with the sole mission to educate our children in Western settler colonial education in English.
They had Bureau of Indian Affairs schools, church missionary schools, and public schools, but there were no Indian parents on the school board. No Indian parents deciding curriculum. No Indian parents selecting teachers that were going to be in their classroom with their child, forming their child's curiosity and future. And anywhere else in the United States, they had parent-teacher associations, and you had the parents on the school boards. We were denied that voice in the education and the future, therefore, of our children.
You fast forward, there's still 28 schools on our reservation. Every one of them have instruction in English first. Everything that's involved in that school reflect settler Western colonialism. So that was a moment in our history that has impacted us and is still impacting us now.
At one time, in 1800, we had 60 million plus buffalo in the Great Plains area. They were vast, they were abundant, and they were the lifeblood for the people that lived in this part of the world. Through very specific policies, there was an intentional effort by the government to wipe out the buffalo. The reason was buffalo were everything to us. They were our economy. They were our source of food, shelter, clothing, spiritual items. And people understood that if the buffalo were taken away, that our ability to be self-sufficient would no longer exist, and we would be forced to come on to reservations and be forced to be reliant upon the government. And so there was a very specific effort. And what happened is that by 1900, there were less than 1,000 free roaming buffalo. We went from 60 million plus to less than 1,000 in 100 years.
Indigenous people own 5% of this country's land base. Globally, indigenous people own 28% of the Earth's land surface. The amount of resources, and 80% of the biodiversity is on our land. We should be the richest people around by economic law. So what is this if it's not the fact that our assets are taken, converted into cash for them, or the benefit of the asset is derived and directed to them? We might still own the Colorado River, but they've diverted the water. You know, so we were looking at every point how our assets were used to make them wealthy.
We really believe, and I really believe, that what we have to be working for is a balance in all things, in the way we think, in the way we act, in our relationships to one another and the earth. And so that's what we're actively fighting for here, is a restoration of that balance.
One of the central components of our work is what we call 7Gen, or we chonchage shakowi. And for us, as indigenous people, 7 generations is, you know, something that you know, probably all indigenous people share. But for us as Sichangu Lakota, it is very deep and very specific. For us, the process is really simple, is act in the best interests of your great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren. It is make moral and ethical decisions that place the good of the group, above the good of the individual. And finally, it is make decisions using complex, and finally, it's make decisions using complex decision models.
So our 7Gen vision really started off with the idea of what kind of world we want to see in the next 7 generations. And for us, I think we've always wanted to have community input first. And so we started off by doing like community roundtables and did like visioning exercises with people to see like what do people want to see. And that's actually how the Food Sovereignty Initiative program started, was from community input. People wanted to see more local food access, more community gardens and greenhouses. And so that's kind of how we started the program off. But I think for us, we wanted to see what the community looked like in terms of, you know, our greatest threat right now is social inequality and climate change. And so what do we need to be doing differently in order to make sure we have a vibrant and thriving world for the next 7 generations? And we've kind of talked about generations being about 25 to 30 years, and so we're having to think 175 years into the future, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. I think a lot of people are kind of thinking about maybe the next 10, maybe just at least 1 generation. And so I think for us, we're thinking about, you know, what does energy look like for us? What does our housing look like? What does education look like? Where are we getting our food from? And so we're trying to think of all these questions that we might have to ask ourselves in the community.